Greetings, Mark Rang here, publisher of The Sun, and today my guest is State Senator President Jeb Bradly. Jeb,
hey, Mark.
how are you?
I am great. How are you?
Good. Hey, what is the difference between a Senate President and a Majority Leader?
So the Senate President presides. That's one big difference. And Senate President appoints people to committees, members of committee or conference. But when I was Majority Leader and Chuck Morse was Senate President, we worked together really well. Sharon Carson, who's the Majority Leader now, works together with me really well. But the beauty, Mark, of the New Hampshire Senate, there are only 24 of us. We're only glorified volunteers. We all get along, even despite our political differences. So I think that we have a pretty smooth running body, and there's a lot of mutual respect across the political divide, if you will. And I think that makes the Senate a much better place.
Well, right. I mean, there's just fewer of you. I mean, typically, even in Congress, the U.S. Congress, right, you guys are a little higher up in the food chain, put it that way. You're not going to say that.
No, but because there are 435 members of Congress, every 2 years you're fighting for the gavel. And it just reflects in the way that, legislation gets put together in Washington. I mean, that's absolutely the case. I think in the New Hampshire Senate, we tend to move a little bit more to the middle because that's where reasonable compromise comes. And I think because there are only 24 of us, we all get to know each other. I mean, Becky Whitley, she's probably the most liberal senator from Hopkinton. She's not running again because she was thinking about running for Congress. We're good friends. And while we didn't agree on a lot of things, there were some things that we did agree on. And when we agreed on them, we were able to get the job done. And so she's done a lot of great work on, children's safety issues, funding for newborn mothers. So that comes from the Senate.
Right, and the Senate is more thoughtful. I don't mean to diss anybody and who's the reps, and we reps are everywhere, right? And they represent us. But I mean, even in the U.S. Congress, the rep's job is to represent their constituents, and the Senate is more of a thoughtful, contemplative, kind of get things done kind of body. I guess it's my.
And I think certainly the 8 terms that I've been in the Senate, that's how it's been.
Yeah. Okay, so you're retiring. This is it. You're retiring.
Yep.
And you'll be done in, I guess, in January, right? Or
December.
December. And what are you going to do?
So top priority is to help Karen finish her grid. And so
Karen, your wife.
Karen, my wife.
Who's
yes.
off camera here.
Yep.
Hey, Karen.
And she has been so supportive of my efforts. She, hiked with me all the time when I was finishing my grid. So she got closer and closer, and now it's time for her.
And the grid is, just so people who aren't hikers, hike all the 48 4,000 footers in the state and doing each one each month.
Yes, that's correct.
Right, so that's 48.
Usually takes most people several years to do it.
Yeah, and what do you have many more, Karen, do you have any more, how many more slots do you have to check?
About 80 of the 576.
Yeah.
About 80 left.
Yeah, so So well, heading into winter, those are the fun hikes, right?
Well, she's finished January, February, and March.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay,
so she's done some of the hardest months. So now it's just a question of filling in what she didn't get to do.
Yeah, okay, well, that's easy. All right.
Well, it's not easy, but
I don't mean
we're going to get it done.
No, that's an incredible accomplishment, and I appreciate that. Do you guys know, it's another off subject, I was going to talk about Miriam Underhill. Do you know that name? She was the first woman. My sister lives in her house, or she's long gone, Miriam Underhill, back in the 30s, but she was the first woman to do all the 4,000s.
Oh, yeah?
And her husband, they lived up in Randolph, which is next to Gorham, and he was like a Harvard professor type. And she wrote a book. She was the first woman to climb Matterhorn. And she was a very progressive woman. And I don't remember the title of the book. It was basically like, I did it without a man's help. It was like with that kind of thing, so she was tough. Anyway, accomplishments. I've endorsed you. I mean, how many years did you serve in the Senate? Have you served?
16.
16.
Yes.
And before that, in the mid-aughts, you were a congressman in Washington, and that's when we get to know each other. And since then, I've really endorsed you literally every time. And it's the easy endorsement, because I always say that Jeb Bradly is the most, accomplishes the most effective legislator in the
Thank you.
New Hampshire Senate. So what do you think? I'm going to say I think I know you got a list of accomplishments, but to me the Medicaid expansion kind of stands out. Is that? Where you
I
put
would
that?
agree totally with that. I think, there were so many people that worked together to get that done. It was hard too. It was part of Obamacare, and it closed a gap where people weren't eligible for the exchanges, but not eligible for traditional Medicaid. And we just had to do it. And so there was a lot of controversy about it back in 2014 and 16, the first two authorizations, because people were afraid that, New Hampshire taxpayers were going to get stuck with a bill and that it would impact other necessary state services. But we were able to do it in such a way with the federal funding that protected our general fund and made sure that, the promise of Washington to fund it 90% is in place. And so as it has developed, and when we got to 2018, people were willing to say it should be authorized for 5 years. So again, in 2023, we had to do it again, and now we've authorized it for 7 more years. The fact that it's not permanent, I think it should be permanent, but some people just want to have more oversight over it, ensure the feds are keeping their commitment, which they have, for the 10 years that it's
Because it
been
started off
part
at,
of the landscape.
It started off at 90% federal funding, right?
No, it started out 100%, and it's gone down to 90%. That is the commitment that the feds have made, and they have made that. So we take a small amount of state dollars to match the 10%. It comes from, a tax on insurance policies. A Medicaid expansion is an insurance policy. It comes from some liquor revenue that's not part of the general fund, but it's like generally $7 to $10 million that we have to transfer. When you think about the benefit, okay?
Right, so if it's 10 million for us, it's almost 100 million for the feds.
Well, yeah, it's 10 million out of the liquor fund. It's a little bit more. We get somewhere in the range of $400 million, but we're getting some of that money already from, the tax on the insurance. So it's a good deal, and it's great for the hospitals because they were having to give care that they were not getting compensated for. And so what happens with that? It becomes a hidden tax. So when you go to have insurance for Conway Daily Sun employees, or any business in Conway tries to insure their employees, they're paying higher prices because hospitals have to get that money from somewhere. So we've dramatically reduced that hidden tax. That's why the business community has supported this wholeheartedly. The other thing that has happened as people get needed health care, okay, and they have the ability to get preventative care in particular, they're healthier and they're able to work. They're able to be more productive. Their kids are more productive in school. So it's had a lot of benefits across the spectrum, which now I think it's embedded in New Hampshire, and I don't see it ever going away as long as the feds keep their commitment.
Right, so it's really two-pronged. One, it helped, and how many people does it help?
About 60,000.
Right, so there's 60,000 people that didn't have health insurance and now do. They're healthier because they're going to the hospital, and it's saving because they used to go to the people that didn't have
The
health
most
insurance. They just go to
expensive care in the ER. Right.
Emergency rooms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And anything, not to go through them all, but what are some of your other accomplishments?
So I think the reforms that we made to the retirement system,
Okay.
that was a big deal because, the state and, local taxpayers too, because, of local employees, we were vastly underfunded for 20 years. So that was a big fix. That was pretty controversial, because we had to make changes and some people didn't like it very much. But I think it's, proven itself over the,
All right, what else?
10 years. I think
Environmentally, you've done.
a lot of environmental stuff. I was honored to be Nature Conservancy
Yeah.
Legislator of the Year a few years ago.
You're the Mount Washington Commission.
Mount Washington Commission, I think that's really important that people have come together on the summit with varied interests, the auto road, the cog railway, the observatory, the state park, all the telecommunication stuff that up there. Now people are rowing the boat in the same direction, which is really good. And the plan is, being implemented right now. The million environmental assessment. So we should be able to both accommodate visitors, but at the same time make sure that the pristine environment is protected.
Is the cog plan of putting a hotel up there or putting railroad cars that would?
I don't know where that's at this
so
point. That was out of the state park. That was, 500 feet lower on the mountain in that flat area where the oil tanks are.
What about the things is there anything you wish you would have accomplished?
So I wish that we had been able to, fix the Medicaid enhancement tax this spring. A future legislature is going to have to deal with that. I think it was really important that hospitals were protected. And so there was controversy about how much money the hospital should get versus how much should go back into the state fund to pay for Medicaid. And I was willing to split the difference, but some people didn't want to.
Okay, so that's a little bit in the weeds for us regular folks. Is there any other big thing that you wish this?
Well, we were able to get bail fixes passed this year. So that had taken 4 or 5 years to get that done. But I'm happy that there was a bipartisan agreement on that, and I'm happy that it passed.
So who is your favorite people to work with? Who is your person on the other side of the aisle that you not like personally or dislike personally, but worked with you that you thought most and you was more of a thorn of your side? Start with the Democrats.
So, Becky Whitley, one of the most liberal senators. Donna Soucy, again, she's maybe not quite as liberal as Becky, but I had great relationships with, both of them, with Senator D'Alessandro, who is also not running again this year. So I've had good relationships with the Democrats. Doesn't mean I've always agreed with them. Doesn't mean they've always agreed with me. But I'd say more often than not, we were able to get things done, and the state has benefited from it. And it goes back to the fact 24 of us, glorified volunteers, we have more respect for each other.
Than the House.
Than the U.S. Congress the Congress is more, the House, in New Hampshire is more divided into factions on both sides of the aisle.
Right, yeah. And what do you think the top issues are? We're heading into obviously a new election here in the next month. What do you think, let me ask you this, what do you think of the challenges are going to be for the state? Like one of them is the budget. When you guys passed the budget, whenever it was last session, and the Dems and the Republicans are happy, that tells me there's a lot of money floating around. And I know the state benefited from a lot of COVID money, hundreds of millions of dollars. So is the budget going to be an issue?
I think that remains to be seen. We're running to the end of the, COVID dollars. So business tax revenue has been off a little bit, but we're still generating surplus. We've got, I think it's about $140 million in, this budget cycle so far, and we're into the second year. Now, September's a big month. We'll see what September comes in, but so far, virtually every month in this budget has generated a surplus. Now, that being said, there are two issues on the horizon. The first is the settlements for the Sununu Youth Center. Mm-hmm. It's a very sad chapter in New Hampshire history. Right. So Karen Umberger led the fight a couple of years ago to set up a settlement fund. Then I had legislation this past year that expanded that somewhat and also put, greater parameters of how the money could be distributed.
How much money are we talking about for those settlements?
We're probably talking several $100 million when all's said and done. So, but what we have done...
That comes right out of the tank, right out of the tax?
Right out of the general fund. What we have done, though, is have the ability of settlements to be structured over 7 to 10 years. Now, anybody that's receiving a settlement will get a 5% interest if it's structured over those 10 years. That will allow the state to manage, the funding of it, which we've capped at about $75 million a year. That's still a huge, huge expenditure. Wow. So that's a problem. Yeah. We're going to have to continue to have strong revenue.
When I hear with AOT, of course, and Joyce Craig are running for governor, and I inundated with the anti-AOT abortion ads. And I don't think, I'm not pro-choice, but personally, but I just don't think, I know abortion is a huge issue nationally and all that, but in New Hampshire, it just seems like it's settled, right? It doesn't, unless...
There are no restrictions Let me repeat that.
24 weeks.
No restrictions until 24 weeks.
Right.
Somebody can get an abortion for any reason up until 24 weeks. Now, that's been my view, but that's not always the most popular view on the Republican side. But most people, Mark, don't think abortion by choice should be allowed, up until the moment of birth, which is what, the Democrats are advocating for. And while they say that it's very rare in New Hampshire, I question them, why are you opposed to the law? Because we built in exceptions to protect, a woman in a medical emergency, or if, the baby can't survive outside the womb, you can have an abortion after that 24 weeks. So I think that the big issues, will be immigration, inflation, how we pay for
in New Hampshire?
In New Hampshire, yeah.
I mean, immigration is not exactly a major issue.
But it is a big issue actually in New Hampshire. The northern border is somewhat porous, and the influx of migrants that are coming into states that have sanctuary policies is a big deal. I mean, Massachusetts is spending over $1 billion to house and shelter people because they had policies that said, come to Massachusetts. So that's an issue. The cost of everything is an issue. Now, inflation is being driven by federal policy, but, to me, it's like, okay, you need to protect our tax status of no income and no sales tax. And you know what? It's generated a lot of surplus over the last 5 or 6 years, which we've plowed back into education funding, plowed back into property tax relief, roads and bridges, things like that. So I think, we've done a pretty good job of managing the fiscal affairs of the state, and that's going to be on the ballot too. And I think Kelly is much stronger on that than
What
her
about
opponent.
on the abortion thing, and not to get into that debate, but it just seems as though that the left, and I don't think abortion, as I said, is going to change much in New Hampshire. It just ain't. But the people on the far left that want it, all through 9 months, and the people on the right want a ban. I mean, there's always that legislation.
But
that's
here's
proposed.
the thing. That is never going to pass in New
Right,
Hampshire.
I appreciate that.
I don't think it's ever going to pass. There are just not enough, members of the legislature that are willing to go below 24 weeks. And Kelly Ayotte, to her credit, has said she will veto anything that is more restrictive than the current law. I think that's a rational place to be. And you know what? Most voters support that too. When you tell people, what the law says, they say, oh, that makes sense. I mean, and the polling has shown that we're at 70+% approval for what we did.
Yeah, and I think it does, and I agree with that, frankly. And if I was pro-life, and I've said this many times, I would do it opposite. No woman in their right mind is going to have an abortion in 8-9 months unless it's a medical issue, and no doctor is going to perform one. So I think that's, frankly, a straw man issue. If I was pro-life, I'd go after the first 24 weeks. But I think it's just a non-issue.
And that is what the debate is all about, because people are fearful of it. But what I'm telling you is, having served in the New Hampshire House for 12 years and then 16 years in the New Hampshire Senate, the way New Hampshire is, more restrictions on abortion ain't passing. It ain't going to happen.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So when I interviewed Joyce and Cindy when they were in the primary, and guess what they said the first thing they would do on day one? They both said it.
I don't know.
Get rid of Frank Edelblut.
Oh, okay. Get rid of Frank.
So on the education freedom accounts, I know you're a choice person, and it seems as though, everybody understands the concept of choice, and I do too. Mm-hmm. But this is where I come, and this is what I think a lot of people are coming from on this. We all pay taxes, right? Pay tons of taxes, things we don't use. So pay taxes for school. If you're special needs in a public high school, you get served. If you're A student, you get served, AP student. Okay, that's fine. We also do public charter schools like we have down the road at the North Woodland School. That's fine. But what I have trouble with is taxpayers' money going to pay for a parent, individual person who wants to send a kid to a religious school or a ski academy. I mean, I grew up in Berlin, Jeb. A third of the kids who were mill workers, Catholics, went to private schools. I mean, went to Catholic schools. They never asked for public funding. So why do I have to pay for some kid, some parent?
I get that argument, but I think here's the counterpoint to it. Why should parents that are affluent and have more choices for their kids be the only ones that have the resources to be able to send their kids who may need something different than what a public school offers.
Well, public and public charter.
Yeah, and public charter.
I mean-
Look, I had 3 kids that graduated from Kingswood. Kingswood was great for them. My daughter had to go somewhere else. I mean, that just happened. I was fortunate to be able to, be able to pay for it.
Right.
But for a low-income family, they don't have those choices. So I think that, the level of funding that we have, which is state funding, that's going to help those low-income families have the same opportunities that somebody like I had or you might have, I don't have a problem with that. And here's the other thing. People say it's robbing the public schools. No, it isn't. We're running a $200 million surplus in the Education Trust Fund, and we pay overall state resources for public education $1.2 billion. So the $20 million that goes to education savings accounts is really pretty de minimis in the overall scheme
But what
of
about the
things.
threshold? I mean, you talked about low-income families, which I think people would agree, but the right wants to increase that salary household income threshold to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And I don't think that's going to happen either.
Where is
right
it now?
right now it's at $90,000 for a family of 4. Okay, and there were proposals to get it up to about $110,000, which, I mean, think of, with inflation, what a family of 4 and $110,000. That's, a
Yep.
middle income family at best. So it's really, focused on people that don't have the same educational opportunities because of their economic status. And I just happen to think that education is so important, and some kids just need that choice and opportunity that they may not be able to get without these.
And I disagree with you philosophically, but isn't it true that 70% of those kids are going to religious schools?
No, I don't think that it's going to religious schools. There were some homeschoolers that, weren't getting any stipend before that are now taking advantage of it. So, but again, why should, a low-income family who wants to homeschool because their kid needs it not have some extra help? I mean, I think it'd be one thing if we really were robbing the public schools, but we're not. We're absolutely not.
All right, I think, okay. We only got, believe it or not, we only have 3 or 4 minutes left.
No.
Yeah, so
We're really going wild.
What about predictions
I'm
here?
filibustering.
What about predictions? I mean, New Hampshire, I guess it's a blue state now.
I think that we haven't had, a Republican member of Congress in quite
Federal.
a while. I think 8 years.
Right.
And I certainly learned that it was purple and blue in 2006 and 8 when I lost. But we're also a red state, I think, in terms of, the state races. And you look at what Chris Sununu has done and how the economy has been strong, and we're one of the safest states in the nation, lowest poverty rate. We, respect people in that we don't have an income tax or a sales tax. Those are going to be the big issues in the, elections this fall. And I think that, Kelly Ayotte is going to be able to articulate that. And I think, against Joyce Craig, who's had, a lot of problems in Manchester.
Right.
Manchester's a Democratic city that just elected a Republican mayor because of her issues. So we'll see what happens, but I think Kelly's in a really strong spot.
I mean, she's definitely, the little that I know Kelly, and I used to know her when she was a senator and all that, and I endorsed her. But I think with Trump at the top, I think when close races like this, it could be, and up here, north of Concord, it's like Joyce who, right? I mean, we just don't have any idea. And so obviously, Kelly has that name recognition, and people like her. She's a good person.
People do like her. She'll be a good governor. She brings people together. She has a good, solid career in law enforcement before, she went to the U.S. Senate, and she really specialized on, foreign affairs in the U.S. Senate, which that's important too, especially, today. So she'll put a good team around her. She has a good team, in her election. Look, I supported Chuck Morris because he was my best friend. And
in the primary.
In the primary. But having said that, Kelly's going to do a great job.
Yeah.
She will do a great job. She'll protect, the New Hampshire advantage, no income tax, no sales tax, but she's going to work to solve problems. And we have to do things for housing, for mental health, for substance abuse. all of which, she, I think, is going to be very supportive of. She'll be just like Chris Sununu.
I think,
and Chris has been very successful.
No, everybody liked him, and he's moderate. I mean, that's our state, is that we have generally moderate, whether they're right or left, we have generally moderate governors. But I think the coattails of Trump and the fact that
Who knows? That could be a problem.
Are you supporting Trump?
I'm going to vote for him because I support the policies that he articulates, and I don't support, the Biden administration and open borders and the high inflation and, the energy policies.
So you think the 220 was stolen? You agree with Trump on that?
No, I don't.
Do you think we should pardon the people who stormed the Capitol?
No, I don't think that.
Okay.
I don't agree with him on everything.
What do you agree with him on?
Well, I want to close the borders, and I think we have to get spending under control so that we don't have the inflation.
Spending. You know that.
We had to deal with a pandemic, but what happened after, I think, has led to,
he spent
inflation.
More money. You know that. He spent more money.
He spent more money than he should. I agree. Right. But, we've had a blowout under Biden, too, of spending. And, when you end up at 9% inflation, and it's come down some, but, prices haven't come down.
You really think it was Biden's fault that we had inflation?
I think that was a huge part of it.
It spiked in 2021. The first year he was in. You think in 1 year it went up?
Because they passed all the Inflation Reduction Act.
COVID had nothing to do with it, the supply chain stuff and all that?
I think that had some impact, but also energy prices spiked dramatically under Biden because he started closing down pipelines.
You didn't close down pipelines. I'm going to argue this.
No, he did. He closed down the Keystone.
He never opened it. It never opened.
Right, but it would be operating.
We're producing more fossil fuels than ever. We're the biggest producer of fossil fuels in the world.
And you know what? We could be producing even more, and it would have lower energy. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be going to renewables.
They're shutting down.
I agree.
The natural gas people, I was just reading today in the Wall Street Journal, they're shutting down because the prices are so low.
Really?
So the Biden administration. Anyway, so you vote. This is my prediction for the national election. If Trump wins, it'll be the end of the Conway Daily Sun.
Why?
One, because he wants to get rid of Obamacare. He tried it before, right?
And that won't happen either.
Well, and the other thing is that the tariffs. In 2017, he put those tariffs on newsprint. Our newsprint bill went up 50%.
Really?
It killed us. And he's promising tariffs again, and we won't be able to handle it this time. So this could be your last. You're supporting a guy, and this could be your last.
I want to make sure that the Conway Daily Sun survives.
Thank you. That
but
means you can't
I want
to.
And you know what? Trump threatens a lot of things without doing them. Now, I know he did put on those tariffs, but we got better trade deals with Canada and Mexico because of it. And I think that, we can't just let China eat our lunch either.
No, we're not. We're keeping out those electric vehicles. We're doing a good job. Jeb, it's always a
pleasure.
All right. Okay. Take care.
All right.
Okay,
thank you.
See you later.